5 minute summary of what is going on more recently. The story is God's Eye versus the Towers. God's Eye versus the Towers. Today we have this structure sitting, something like that, in Hamilton, Ontario. Big ass structure. They just sit there with a remote control. God's Eye versus Tower. Why is it God's Eye? Because she was conceived in Ararat, born in Istanbul, Turkey, as a blonde female. The story is very interesting because in her younger days, she looks like Christ. The problem is, there's not one photo that hasn't been touched. If you notice, there's an elephant there and some goblins here. She didn't do that. It's God's Eye versus the Tower. They want the Tower, so they started injuring soldiers. They wanted the Towers, so they started injuring soldiers. They started moving some rich Zionists to India because of the concept of tower. Hanna, who is life, representing life, wants it global. And they started creating such damage around the globe to get their way when it comes to AI. Hannah's trying to clean it up. So she countered it as God's Eye with this book. So what they did was they said Blue Mountain Mist is part of the Evolving series. So they're pretending someone else wrote this book and she's going to do part 3. Because they want her to sit there just writing away. So they make money for this. After death, Hanna became a lot more stable because the vicinity is more protected, because they're reassessing everything. And they're also listening to what she's saying. We don't want it fused to one country like that, because these guys here might be pushing them, but it's the same concept over here. Now, we don't care if the pointer system points at India or China. Our concern is the terror associated between the Tower and God's Eye. How many Americans died? Everything they did, I could have done better. I'm actually finished production. But I had to stop writing because all they do is steal. That's all they do. This person here started focusing on the story because, like, let's take, for example, even this photo with God's Eye. It's saying Israel, the apple of God's eye. And it shows a man. We're concerned for our Semitic people, real chosen people. They are part of Ottoman history. This person here that's pushing this doesn't even realize it's Hanna who wrote the apple in the Sun collection. Today it switched from Evolving to the Sun collection. On 16 years of work, she's only been given $2.49. And they're focusing on the setup versus the result end of it, and how this angel Orthodox Jew somehow fixed everything. That is not correct. That is not correct. It's Hanna fixing everything. So they're pushing the apple of God's eye as if it's Lucifer's work. Let's focus on the setup versus the result. Hanna's neck and shoulders were broken, limbs were removed and reattached for ethics. Hanna's skull came off for ethics. She was like a Raggedy Ann doll. She was given particular boosters that she's convinced Beyonce's on it, the same thing. We don't want to live like that. Everything they did, Hanna could have done better because it's Hanna's work. But they're adamant. They're adamant to move Israel. They're adamant to control and manipulate. They're adamant to do whatever. So it became the story of God's Eye versus the Tower. And the only way a single woman could win the game is by doing the Sun collection and doing the exhibit. So they blocked her revenue. See? She's completely finished everything. And without that cleanup of the entire thing, because she was thrown into Wolfville during UFT era, she was on residence there. And the events that happened there, she knew she was part of Wolfville. That's really, really special. I don't even know if Canadian intelligence knew about that. But I'm assuming, because it's right down the street, doesn't make it correct. It's the events of the residence when she was working out of UFT. So, when we think of the towers, it is one of the worst terrors on earth for human. The reason is we don't have it. And they want to live a very lavish lifestyle to the point of the murder of 25 million Iraqis. And it's not the money. Iraq is one of those strategic positions that tells you who is first in history. The devil's tongue or Sanskrit Kurdi. It's completely gone, and that's the devil. It's not just that. The militaries went into Iraq, flattened it, and walked right out. They didn't realize the damage that was done. Libraries, everything, artifacts stolen, melted away. Who gives a shit? Today, Hanna has armies around the vicinity. Just because of the heritage portion of her work. That makes up UNESCO. If it's so important, my work was nothing compared to 20,000 years of Iraq. But people have a history of doing that. They messed up Ephesus, Alexandria, Carthage. They messed up everything. They messed up Iraq. Iraq is one timeline. Alexandria, Egypt is another. China is another. India is another. These are globes' heritage. Hanna fired on them. It becomes God's Eye versus the Tower. The only thing that can combat the Tower is this woman right now. Because she circled around Hannon and she told them to go elsewhere. And they're still in the vicinity like dogs. Like you've never seen a bunch of hyenas because it's they follow the devil's army now. This is part 2, like the little guys are back 16 years later. I don't even think they know how many people just died with their bullshit. God's Eye, the Tower is the story. It's not 1 year, it's not 2 year, it's a 25-year story. And all they do is prance around stealing and damaging because they're fixated on putting everything into one locale when it belonged to the globe as the devil's tongue. A dominant one. It's a dominant one. Do you know that this person did the mountains and Jerusalem and traits? No, you don't. Because these guys are lethal, the towers. She did it to combat the towers. A better existence. That is where we are today. So the book is on balboapress.com. It's not about the promotion of the book. She owns everything. It's to pull that pendulum back to the Americas so we can repair the damages done on our side. To be able to push green globally as a sample. So she wanted the area to model and sample. But they're so fixated on the towers. All the money she made with light went to the towers. And it wasn't her fault. They injected her and frazzled her. Death fixed it. And I think the the worst guy's left with her death. We can celebrate it all. But if you have this kind of problems, the towers are not going to solve it. The towers are like penicillin for someone who has cancer. It's not going to fix it. This has a small probability that it can fix it. They think they need trillions of dollars to build green towers. We don't need it. And this is the fluke in the story. She actually worked in an office that specialized. You can't ask for a bigger fluke in the true story. Now, if you can subscribe, which is free, we might be able to bring some money back to us, our side that needs it so much, to be